Get help with CSEC Biology SBA Labs and Human and Social Biology SBA Labs at tcp-academy.com. Tim had questions. He wanted to know where he could get help with his SBA Labs. His parents searched but could not find that experience. Tim also made some calls, however could not find the help he needed. Tim needed an experience he could trust to help him get over the hurdle of SBAs as success was in sight. He met the guys from tcp-academy.teachable.com and they designed a program to help him. tcp-academy.teachable.com was able to help him. So too, they can help you. Sign up tcp-academy.teachable.com for help with your SBAs in biology and human and social biology. Welcome to TCP Academy. I am Mr. Wilson. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the mark scheme for the new Human and Social Biology SBA that is effective for the May-June exam 2022. I would have done a sample SBA for the students and teachers who would want to have a look at it and would have not had access to that which was sent out by CXC. So you want to stick with me for the next few minutes as I break down the criteria so that you can go through your SBA and make sure that you would have obtained full marks before you hand in SBA. Just a quick reminder here, the adherence to the 1,000 word is a restrict guideline. If you were supposed to go over by about 150 words thereabout, then you are going to be penalized by a 10% demerit, which is definitely not going to be nice for your SBA. So I suggest to you that you put the bibliography, the pictures, charts, graphs, those in a document by themselves, the appendix in a document by themselves, and then you type your SBA by itself to ensure that you have that 1,000 word or somewhere close. Please try not to go over the 1,000 words. Now, the mark scheme for the school-based assessment, and this is from the CXC, the Caribbean Examination Council, CSEC, report should be marked out of an aggregated 40 marks to be applied to the use of knowledge profile. The following table shows the criteria that should be used to allocate marks for the various components of a report. Interesting to note here is that it's the same mark scheme that will be used to mark all the HSB labs across the Caribbean, one might say in all 16 territories. So let us look at the first part of the mark scheme here. We're looking at one that looks at background or overview of the issue. What do we need to do to score full marks here, which is of course 2 marks? Now provide a clear detailed description of a current health-related or environmental issue. Now, if that is clear as stated there, then you'll get your full marks. However, if description is detailed but lack clarity, then you're going to be getting 1 mark. So a nice way to get this done is to observe an area or make sure there's an observation and give a little story about the area. Tell us what's in the area, why are you studying the area, what's the importance of studying the area, and possibility. Are there any complaints coming from members of the community that would warrant us doing a research to see if we can solve the problem? All that bit must be highlighted in the background knowledge, as it's from this background knowledge that we're going to be getting information to determine whether or not the research makes sense. Last year, many students differed on their CXC exams as they were afraid of failure due to their level of readiness. This year, Mr. Wilson and his experienced team from TCP Academy.teachable.com is here to help you get exam ready. Subscribe for free to tcp-academy.teachable.com. We offer courses in CXC Biology, HSB, English Language, and many others. There are several offerings to each course. Enroll in one today. Then the other part we want to look at is the problem statement. And the problem statement, I think I prefer for persons not to ask what in your problem statement. Now, the research problem is stated clearly. You're going to get 1 mark for that. And for this section, the mark is broken into 2. The other mark you're going to get research problem is in an appropriate form, an observation or question. So an observation or a question, you would have done your research, and based on what persons are saying out there from the observation, then it is clear that this is the reason for whatever is being experienced, and from that we can develop the research. So one might say uh, flooding or improper disposal of garbage is the cause for flooding, and then we can look at that as the research or problem statement. So you remember the research or problem is appropriate, and this could be written as an observation as a problem statement, or it could be written as a question. Now, another thing for us to look at here is 3, the research objective. What is it that you intend to find out from this research? And that is for 2 marks, and it is separated 1 mark each. 1 mark will be given for the objective of the research if it is linked to the issue that you observe. So the background knowledge that you have there, if the research is linked to that, then you're going to be given 1 mark. Now, objective of the research is realistic and feasible. Now, we know the limitations we have in our high school settings across the Caribbean. There are some equipment we don't have. We don't have the time frame to do some things. We just don't have some things that are going to be needed to do some sophisticated research. So make sure that the research is pretty much within your domain to accomplish. You don't want to take up one would say in Jamaica, you really don't want to bite more than you can chew. So make sure that you are following that in your research. Please use this as a checklist to ensure that you would have scored full marks for the areas we've looked at before. The nice part of the research to me is the methodology that comes up at 4 here. You're going to be given 8 marks for that. And let me provide a little clarity here. Sample use is identified and clearly described. You're going to be given 2 marks for that. What is the sample? So the sample in this case is going to be those persons who you are interviewing, those persons who are going to be filling out the questionnaire, and you're going to get the information here to clearly describe them from your demographic data. So this might look at the age of the individual, the sex of the individual, the number of persons you sampled, whether they are employed or unemployed. Are they aware of a problem? Are they from the area that is being sampled? That definitely will give you some nice information there on the sample that is used. Then we want to look at the data collection instrument that must be identified and clearly described as it would have been for your sample. So your data collection instrument could look at things like observation, interview, questionnaire, and the list goes on and on. But for this case, I think a lot of persons will be looking at interview, survey, questionnaire, and some amount of observation. When you want to describe this instrument that you're using, usually Google provides a very good help. Why are you using the questionnaire? What's the importance of a questionnaire? What are the gained advantages of using your questionnaire? You want to make sure you pack that all in. And of course, they are well named. I use the questionnaire and observation, and you give a clear description there, taking in mind the 1,000 word limit, not wanting to write too much, but ensure that you have enough information to gain 2 marks for that part of the methodology. Then the other part you want to look at is the method of data collection. That must be identified and clearly stated. Are you using random sampling? Is it sequential? Is it a mixed method? What is it that you're using? What method are you using to collect the data? And again, YouTube can provide some information here. Google can provide some information as to why are we using random sampling if that's what you used? What are the benefits to be derived from using the method that you're using? Then the other part we want to look at is the method of data collection is adequately justified. So you're saying exactly the gains of using the method you are using to collect the information. Remember, the method and the instrument, they are different. So we spoke about the instrument being things like questionnaires, surveys, interview, etc. However, the method is going to be random, it might be sequential, or it might very well be a mixed method. Then you want to look at limitations of the data collection method that you used. So you're going to be looking at what are some of the limitations of using the random method. What a limitation could have been, despite it is random, persons who have intent to deceive might still deceive despite it is a random method of collecting the data. If you would have followed this, I'm sure that you're going to be scoring 8 marks for this part of your SBA. Make sure that the mark scheme is a part of your guide in doing the final preparation for submission. Then we have presentation of data. Data is presented in an appropriate form using tables, graphs, charts, etc. Please be reminded that tables are bounded by 4 sides. Please be reminded that if there's a blank space in your table, you want to make sure that there's an hyphen or something there to show that there is no data to be entered in that part of a table. Tables must have titles that are descriptive of what is in the table. The same is true for graphs. They need to have title. Axes are supposed to be labeled, and where there's a need for a key or a scale, that must also be provided. Let us not be confused with a pie chart versus a bar graph or a histogram or a line graph. So charts here are a little different. Also, please be reminded of the flow diagrams that might come in handy if you're looking at things like the mosquito life cycle or the fly life cycle or something like that. These charts might come in pretty handy, and they can of course be added to the appendices. Now, data is presented in at least 2 forms. So we're seeing here we have rows, we have tables, we have graphs, and it's important to observe here that table, it's pluralized, graphs pluralized, charts pluralized. So it suggests to me that whichever one you're using, it would be nice if you use more than one of that type, with the fact that there is, of course, the word there being pluralized. Now, forms used for presentation of data is correctly labeled. So you want to make sure that if you're coming from your table to the graph, the data is of course presented in the right format. The independent variable there, which is usually in the first column of your table, is of course placed on the x-axis. So you want to make sure that you are paying some attention to that, as this information will come in very handy whenever you sit the examination, the paper 2 examination. You're going to need to use this type of information. Data presented are accurate. You're not going somewhere and just sit in your living room and you come up with some numbers that are all fictitious and just doesn't fall within the line of reality, and then you present that to your teacher and you're expecting that you're going to be getting good marks, your teacher should be equipped enough to say that this data cannot hold true. If this were to be so, then a lot of persons would have to be in the hospital and possibilities that we would have to call a state of emergency. So you want to make sure that you spend time to do your research so that your data will be accurate, it will be factual, it will be valid, and of course, reliable at all instances. When we look at 6, we're analyzing and interpreting the data. Let us not confuse analysis of data with a discussion. You're going to be getting 5 marks here. Data is analyzed using appropriate calculation, statistical and themes. So we could show some calculation, how we do some percentage. We could talk about statistical terms like average, mean, median, mode. We could look at those. We could look at how the data is changing. Is it changing drastically, marginal, uh, slightly? All those words, those adjectives we could look at to describe the data that we're looking at. We want to make sure that the high points of a data set that we would have collected is noted in the analysis of the data. 90% of the respondent 10% of the respondent. You want to look at that. There was some amount of fluctuation based on the data, only 20%. That sort of a thing. When compared 10% to 5%, you want to look at the analysis of a data like that, not to provide a discussion, but intend to look at the key points with the statistical theme they're being looked at. Data is summarized accurately. So we want to gather this information from your questionnaire, and having taken this from the questionnaire, we're going to be putting them in tables and graph, and we are now able to analyze the data using the statistical term. Just to remind you, Mr. Wilson is always available to provide some assistance through our TCP platform. Might I just also remind us that it comes at a cost. It's not free. I'm sorry we can't do that just now. But we do provide some guidance to students doing SBAs for both biology and human and social biology. You'll see the ads somewhere in this video. At least 2 statements of findings are based on the data presented. So based on what we observed or based on the respondent, it is clear to say that this is the cause of the problem. 90% of the respondents said so, or 80% of the respondents said so. And we need to make a change here based on the fact that 20% of the respondents they are not in favor of something like that. So the statement, at least 2 of your findings, you want to look at the number 2 there, is pretty much based on the data presented. Now, findings are consistent with analysis. So you are analyzing the data and you think that this is a good move, then your data, the numbers should be showing that what you're saying is true. If it's a good move, then on the positive, you want to see high numbers. If it's a bad move, in most cases, the numbers will be low. So you want to make sure that you're interpreting those numbers correctly, not pretty much validating them as to a discussion. But if you're seeing, well, 90% of a respondent think that if we had bins closer, then we would have less garbage in the community, then that suggests to me that we have a problem that we could easily solve based on the number. So then we could say that by placing the bins closer together or closer, then we would have less garbage in the community based on the fact that 90% of our respondent is of that view. Then we get on down to the conclusion. Your conclusion must be in line with your objective. So you had some objective when you were starting the SBA right after your problem statement. Your conclusion should be based on that. And of course, a questionnaire should help you to solve for the objectives of the SBA. So conclusion is succinctly summarized are pretty much succinctly summarize the project. Now, this is broken in 2 marks, one each. So, based on what you have found, does the number or do the numbers that you would have collected are they supporting what you have said, or it is throwing it out? You're going to use that to make a conclusion. Remember, in making your conclusion, you want to stay away from things like confirmational bias. You were of that view, so you are thinking that the end of the research, it must be this way. Please be reminded, even though you started out and you thought that the research should have been red, and your finding is proving that it is white, you have to go with the findings, not your personal belief. If you're going with your personal belief, that is now space for confirmational bias, and that's something we want to rid ourselves of, as it were, for science. Conclusion is logical, and of course, it's based on the findings, not on your emotion or from your best friend emotion or from a lab that you coined in your classroom or your living room. It must be a lab that is informed by research. The recommendations you want to look here, it's 4 marks, but it's divided into 3 parts. The first part, valued at 2 marks, at least 2 recommendations are proposed. Make sure that the recommendations are plausible. These are things that can be achieved. These are things that are pretty much are in your domain or you can have access to resource to solve the problem. Recommendations are realistic. So now we are realizing that the problem is that there's a whole lot of glass being disposed as a result of somebody who works with glass. They are just disposing it in some area in the community. Don't go telling us in your research that you're going to be setting up a compost heap for the glass. That is not realistic, because we know that, as it were, for biodegradable material, organism must be able to break it down. Now, we don't have any organism in our compost heap that will break down the glass, at least not anytime soon. So make sure that the recommendation is realistic. It is not always true that a compost heap can solve a problem. It might not be true that the 3 R's can solve the problem. So make sure that the recommendation is realistic. We can put in some signs. We can have public education campaign. We can meet with the local community group. We can write to the municipal council. We can write to the solid waste management authority. These are things that we can do. We can write a letter to the editor highlighting the problem. So there are many ways in which we can solve the many problems that we're seeing out there. And in some cases, we can't do it all alone. We need to pen a letter to someone to assist us with the problem. So the recommendation must be realistic. Recommendations are informed by the findings. Don't go out and give us some recommendation that has nothing to do with your local situation. Don't go just pop in some recommendation from the internet or pop in some information from a textbook that was realistic in another country, in another community, in another situation. Make sure that what you're putting in this recommendation is feasible to the area that you are in. We don't want it to be a case where you are in the Caribbean and you're pretty much using a solution for COVID that is probably applicable to England or America or some other country. Make sure that the recommendations that you are making, they are informed by your findings. And for me, when I design a questionnaire for my students or to assist my student or the persons I work with, the advice I usually give for my questionnaire: break your questionnaire in 4 parts. Part one, demographic information. Part two, cause. Part three, effect. Part four, possible solution. If you have a problem in your community or in your local affairs, what you're going to find is that the persons who are in the community, they are affected by the problem, and they will have some amount of idea or information as to how to correct the problem. Do not just run to a textbook to correct a problem when you could have listened to the persons in the community to find out all that is needed is to widen the drain that is in the community. All that is needed is a person to be educated about the problem. All that is needed is for the garbage truck to know that most of the garbage is generated on a Saturday, not on a Monday. So if you come on a Saturday, everything will be fine. If you come on a Monday, there will be no garbage in the community. Sometimes all that is needed is communication. So you want to make sure that this research brings out that type of a skill. Then we get on down to reflection. And this is valued at 6 marks and it is broken up into pieces. So candidate states the following information. Now these must be captured in your reflection. Don't just go and use another reflection from another subject. Make sure you are following this mark scheme for the human and social biology SBA. The reflection. Candidate states the following information. 2 lessons learned after undertaking the project. I didn't even know that there was a life cycle for the fly. I didn't even know that we needed to know the days. I didn't even know that there was a mosquito. Mosquito had a life cycle. I didn't know that there was a specific mosquito that deals with deals with dengue or deals with malaria. I did not know. I did not know that we would have had a rodent problem based on how we dispose of the garbage. I did not know that we would have had flooding. This is pretty much a lesson learned. I didn't know that why persons are getting sick in the community is as a result of our behavior or the anthropogenic impact in the community. I did not know. That's a lesson learned, and having learned that lesson, I am going to be operating this way. I'm going to be try to enforce it that way. I'm going to meet it with the stakeholders to see how we can move forward. So 2 lessons learned. What comes to you new from the project? Don't tell me about the 3 R's because you know about that or you knew about that from primary school. So do not cheat yourself. Read your textbook. The basal readers that are provided, these basal readers can assist you in whatever topic you're doing. If the basal readers cannot assist you, then it means that the project is beyond your CXC syllabus. So make sure that you're reading. If you did not, and it was all about Google or all about the internet, go back to your basal reader, whatever the basal reader is. Go back to that basal reader to ensure that you are capturing information that's relevant to your circumstance. You didn't even know that in the garbage that is being dumped in the community was from somewhere else. You thought it was somebody in the community. Now remember, that's 2 lessons learned having undertaken the project. One way in which the lesson learned could be applied to your personal life. So now that you know that leaving these, dumping the way you do could pretty much cause leptospirosis, now how will you operate differently in your community? Will you be that person of change? Will you be that person that will be that environmental warrior? Will you be that person who will nicely communicate this ill to persons, that persons will stop practicing this ill behavior? Or those type of things we need to look at. Now, another thing we want to look at is one way in which the project could be improved. How are you going to improve this project? Are you going to increase the sample size? Are you going to look at doing this research in other areas to listen to what other persons have to say? Is it that the research would have been better done on a different day of the week, a different time of the day? How are you going to improve this research? Do you need other type of gadgets to carry out the research? What will be needed to make sure that this research is improved for persons who will do this research next year? One social impact, one economical impact the issue could have on your community or your school. Now, as an environmentalist, I like to treat with things like this using my 3Ds, my environmental, my economical, and my social. So when I advise persons as to how to create their questionnaire, under effect, we usually have what are the social effects, what are the environmental effects, and what are the economical effects. And if you have a very good questionnaire, It's going to make your recommendation easy. It's going to make your reflection easy as well. So make sure that you have a wonderful or an awesomely designed questionnaire. I do hope that that word was correctly used, but I do hope that you have a good questionnaire that will make the job easy. Then we are at the last point for 4 marks, overall presentation. The layout of report follow the correct format, inclusive of cover page, table of content, bibliography, and of course appendices. Now, once you would have gotten your 1,000 word together, then you can now put in your bibliography. You can now put in the appendices, all those things that can be added now that would not affect the 1,000 word count. You can get them in. Now, if layout includes only 2 elements, you're going to be getting 1 mark. Come on, guys. This is somewhere that you have to score full marks because I would have put it out, and I'm going to be putting out the layout after this video again so as to make sure that everybody knows what is required by CXC in order for you to get full mark. The bibliographic information contain name, name of the author, name of the publisher, and date of publication. I am seeing some referencing now, and they are just some hyperlink ripped from the internet. There's no name. You don't know who wrote the article. You really don't know when the article was published. You don't even know which website it's really from unless you click that hyperlink or you're able to decipher from the hyperlink. So make sure that if you don't know how to write the bibliography, go to Google. If you don't know how to write the bibliography, look for a bib template on the internet to make sure that this 1 mark counts. You are always going to need to write, you're always going to be writing a bib as long as you decide to continue academic pursuit. So make sure that you are able to do that. Consistent use of correct spelling and grammar. Hey, watch the English in this stuff. All right? Watch the English, watch the grammar. Make sure you have somebody read it over. In most cases, we are writing just the way we talk. So if you are writing the way you talk, please be careful. I know that in some cases we are seeing the WhatsApp texting in the notes that persons are writing. So you are writing now your thesis paper, you are writing your research, but you have now fallen over into your messaging system and you are putting your BR, whatever those abbreviations are, you are putting them in the project. Please ensure that there's nowhere in the project that for your teacher to click and get to the document because you have just ripped things from the internet and now there's content there suggesting to the teacher if they click here they might be able to go somewhere unless that hyperlink is needed, and must be something that is discussed with your teacher before you are doing this clicking all over the place. I do hope that having explained the mark scheme, you are now able to get that 40 out of 40. That should contribute about 20% of the marks needed for the exam. Now, I spoke about the layout of the lab, and in summary here, we have 10 points. You are seeing on screen how the lab must be laid out. Make sure that you follow this design. Please be reminded, I am Mr. Wilson. If there is need for help with labs, you're in grade 10 or grade 11, and it's human and social biology CSEC or biology CSEC, you can reach out to Mr. Wilson. You're going to be seeing my email address and, of course, my website tcp-academy.teachable.com at the end of this video. I would love for you to sign up to one of those accounts. We are looking forward to see you there. Please be reminded to like, share, and of course subscribe so that we can continue to make these videos that most persons would have said are helpful to them. Until next time, continue to study.